Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm LindsayThompson from Henry Bemis Books in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is day two of the 36th Florida Antiquarian Book Fair live. We are the Wayne's World of book television. And today we have an overflowing show, beginning with the hour, which we're going to run as a usual Rare Book Cafe program. This is our general time slot on Saturdays, 2:30 to 3:30. And three of our team is actually at the book show, their authentic roles as book dealers on camera for you live. It's going to be a graphic special. And with us right now, first I'll introduce everyone who's here, and then we'll jump into our first segment. On the big screen right now is Alan Singleton, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Minister of Finance at Biblio.com. Biblio is our chief sponsor for the book fair this year. Welcome, Alan.
Hello, glad to be here.
And in the next screen is Amber Shehan. She is the public affairs and who deals with problems and chief book pixie at Biblio. And they are both from Asheville, North Carolina, when they are not in the sunnier climes of St. Petersburg. And with our co-host, Steve Eisenstein of Bric-a-Brac Books. He has been, the Coliseum was built around him in 1924, and he's had Alcove 6 ever since.
It's in my will. It's in my will for my nephews.
And then behind the camera is Allan Smith, our producer. We've traded places today to reenact the Peter Principle for you, which holds that people rise to their maximum level of incompetence. And that is the universe today. I am producer and host.
Hey,
something is going on.
No, nothing. We're waiting. We are here. Is it my turn? Can I talk?
Yes, you can. I know it.
Okay. Hi, we want to welcome everybody to the fair. It has just been phenomenal. Lindsay, Kara, wish you guys were here. It has been a phenomenal fair. If you looked in my booth, if there was some way to pan the camera, it won't move as you pan the camera. You see those big holes over there? There's a gentleman with a green t-shirt there. As soon as he moves, those represent shelves of books that have fallen over because we have sold them. It has been phenomenal. And we can't thank Biblio enough for what you are doing for the fair. Everybody knows what you're doing, and we want to thank you for it. There are fairgoers. My booth has gone like a hurricane, in and out, in and out, in and out. And people have been buying. We have sold everything from rare versions of Aspen magazine, which is an Andy Warhol art magazine, amongst others, to 10-volume sets on Winston Churchill's. Somebody went home with the first 26 volumes of the Hardy Boys. Throw in a lot of art, architecture, photography, hunting, fishing, firearms, archery, military history. A few requests for Western Americana, which unfortunately we didn't have. And it's just been great. It's been great. Lindsay, I truly hope that you can be with us next year on the floor. That's my wish.
Well, every year this time I say next year in St. Petersburg.
Well, I hope so. I really do. So this is your second fair, Amber. What do you think of it?
I'm having a blast. I came much more prepared this year, and I have, beyond the Biblio responsibilities, have purchased a couple things that I did not expect to. And so I am participating fully in the bookish madness and having a great time with it.
I know, and those confessions of a biblioholic, what were those unexpected books that said, you're not going home in anybody's bag but mine?
It wasn't books, remember. I'm all about the ephemera.
Okay.
So this year was the final year of Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. I now have a 1948 schedule of events with annotations from someone traveling along with the circus. And also a pre-1975 program from the Rocky Horror Show with Tim Curry and Meatloaf before it was ever made a movie.
Wow.
And I'm a Rocky Horror fan, so that is
we
that's
used to
near
go
and
to
dear.
Coconut Grove to see them many times. Did you meet Larry Kellogg yet?
No.
You want to meet Larry Kellogg. Larry Kellogg was at one time the chief promoter, cook, bottle washer, and everything else that went on with the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. Larry is a circus aficionado supreme. His collection is amazing. You've got to meet him. I know Allan knows him. We will make it a point, Amber, that if you like circus, you will
As a
meet Larry.
and theater freak, that sounds like the best thing.
You know, the strangest things have happened at this book fair in this booth, and I mean that. You, as a rare bookie, are involved in entertainment. I'm a rare bookie. I was involved in entertainment. 2 years ago, in the booth that was there, there's very few people who have ever been on Ascension Island. It's an island off the coast of Africa. I was on Ascension Island, and the man who was the book dealer across the way was also a pilot that flew into Ascension Island. So there's like some Twilight Zone music going on today, folks. Let's see what else we could find. Lindsay, Kara, let's turn it back to you guys. What's up?
Well, Kara is away just now. She's going to be dropping in and out until part 3, when she has invited a bunch of her book-selling friends to drop in. We have it, and we're going to play with some of the marvels of technology. For example, I think if we could zoom in, we could probably see Allan up on the mezzanine behind you in the back.
Zoom in. Well, Allan is standing in front of me right now.
I'm talking
The other
about
Allan.
Oh, the other Allan. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He's up there.
Okay, we can do the dance.
Aren't we going to create a feedback loop if we do that?
I wasn't suggesting that we actually do it, just that
All
we
right.
half of that thought, which was
Issue me a challenge.
the other half of that thought was that Megan Bell from Underground Books is going to phone in from the other side of the hall, and she's got her laptop at her booth, and so it's going to be like we're all on the same other.
Okay.
So what have you been? Have you seen anybody you didn't expect to see this year, or who popped up you haven't seen in ages?
The regulars are here. There have been new people here also. The array of what we're selling and the comments and questions that we're getting are interesting. I'll tell you some things that came into the fair. A woman came in with a dust-jacketed gun with the wind, signed and inscribed by Margaret Mitchell. Thorne and I were out on a lobby trip. As we passed by, there was a woman with a box full of religious books. The Bible that she had was nice, but nothing much. But Thorne actually bought, we've been talking about them on both shows, a Leaf book. He bought the second edition Leaf from the Algonquin Indian Bible. So it was nice to be able to walk out there. I kind of helped them both put the deal together, you know, and we've also introduced our favorite friend in religious books, Stroud Booksellers. Anybody watching this in the future, if you ever have anything to do with religious books, Stroud probably has been here longer than I have. If I'm a fixture, you know, he came with the ark that they brought the wood over with for this place. So, you know, it's been great. I mean, if there was a way to do it, my booth right now went from empty to 7 or 8 people. Everybody's turning pages. Listen, you remember, everybody's been to a sales presentation. What's the first thing that they ever tell you? Never ask them, can I help you, right? Because the answer is no. Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention? Would you like the thrill of discovery or the agony of the guided tour of the books in the booth? See that? We got laughter. I've been saying that for 22 years. Okay? No exaggeration. That line came with the booth. Okay?
Well, you missed it, Stephen, but yesterday when Amber was on her quest to find the rarest, she and Allan stopped at and she explained to Mr. Stroud what the nature of her quest was, and he didn't bat an eyelash. He pulled out a manuscript leaf from the year 1280 and a book from the 16th century.
Wow.
It
Wow,
was
interesting.
amazing.
Well, if you want to see it later, I know you're going to do a segment in Thorne's booth. He can show you. I'm going to go sell a book. I'll be back. I'll be back.
All right. I get 2 earbuds. All right.
Boy, so you get the full stereo experience.
Well, we're having a lot of fun here today. Allan and I have been just walking up and down the aisles and meeting folks and people I've only emailed and talked to on the phone and shaking their hands and seeing their wares, and it's a beautiful thing.
Well, we're all envious. You and Allan number 2 gave us such an entertaining tour yesterday.
It was a little easier to look at books without being joined at the ear.
It's true.
But it was a really nice morning. We walked through, just a fraction of the fair, and looked down at my phone and realized, well, it was time to get some lunch. And it was amazing just how quickly the time passes going through here. Talked to several of our sellers, which is always exciting. Good to meet folks, and just fascinated to look at their books.
While we have a little pause here between interviews, why don't the two of you take a moment to ready information and tell us a little bit about what Biblio does, because we've reached 22,000 people this week just on Facebook, and I'm sure that means a lot of folks may not know exactly all the things Biblio does.
All right.
Sure.
Well,
Go for it, Allan.
Okay, I'll jump in, and Amber, jump in as needed. We're a marketplace for used, rare, and out-of-print books, and we bring together roughly 5,000 booksellers really from all over the world, make their inventory all searchable in one place. If you place an order on Biblio, then it's going to be shipped directly from one of those independent sellers to the customer. And a lot of what we do day to day is kind of help create that marketplace, help booksellers upload inventory to it, and then also kind of help booksellers and customers deal with any issues post-sale. So we're there as a resource if there's any problem really on either end, and to try to make sure that buying and selling experience is really easy on both ends, and try to take a very even-handed approach and treat the sellers as the expert business partners that they are.
Now, Allan and I called you guys the other day, and I was surprised and delighted to discover that you actually answer the phone yourselves. Why is that? Do you not have legions of minions?
We are a small company. There are.
How small are you?
There are 6 of us. We have 6 full-time employees. We don't outsource customer service. We don't put that to a call center or else. That goes for calls, be it also for email. So, at any given point, there are 4 of us who are potentially kind of in the queue for dealing with frontline phone calls, whether it's from customers or booksellers. And we try to share the email duties as well. And that's just kind of part of the reality of running our business with a small team of people and trying to provide, really good customer service for both, book buyers and, and our booksellers.
Well, let me ask Amber something right quickly. I'm assuming with only that many few people to answer the phone, it means you have incredibly satisfied customers who never call, or you never get anything else done, and that's why you have so much automated.
Well, we've got a little bit of both. I mean, we do try to automate some of the processes as we can, but to never be completely hands off. I mean, it matters a lot to be involved in the question, and because issues that come up often can't be handled by just one flat answer. We're more mediators between a bookseller and a customer who have issues with something after the purchase, or for a book that hasn't been delivered yet. You know, we kind of stand in the medium to bring the answers together. But some things, you know, there are no just quick and easy answers for. We just do our best to help on a case-by-case basis, while still, like, you know, Allan said, leaving our booksellers the ability to make decisions on their own. We're not trying to take the business out of their hands.
Mm-hmm. So at work, can you all see each other so that if one of you wants to say, I can't take that call, I'm busy, everybody knows when you're not telling the truth?
We can all, yeah, we all hear each other. 4 rooms in the office, and the 2 where we have the most folks on phones are next to each other, and so we kind of hear what's going on all the time. That's a good thing and a bad thing at times. And
for the customer, it's great. But, I mean, phone contact with a computer service business. I can't. Every time I get onto a phone that tells me a menu, in somewhere, you know, I get to a supervisor or something. Is there any way I can press a button that would just put me to a human rather than, you know, when eBay started, I was told I was very lucky to actually have gotten 1 phone call into them. I gathered today you can't even do it. So that's to be totally commended, that you're accessible. I mean, accessibility is so important.
Well, and serving as a technological service, you know, a technical service that, I mean, we have to be available. It's people's business, it's people's books. On the customer side, it's people's money and their trust, and we have to be available. There's not really another option.
As long as you the option to go to, or, you know, to do it we want to refer you to the computer. The fact that you're answering it with a human voice is just to be commended.
We do our best.
Yeah. And, you know, we are at the same time trying to make sure things are as easy as possible. I mean, there's a limitation, obviously. Like, if we, you know, we're flooded with phone calls on, you know, 10% or even probably a lower percent of the orders that we take, you know, we wouldn't be able to function.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I don't mean
a large
to
part of
interrupt.
that is,
I am being paged to the sales floor. Some things matter. See you guys later.
sell those books.
Brisk business today.
We try to make things work as smoothly as possible, and we're trying to always look for places that are creating a barrier or a friction, or, you know, that are causing people to need to call us, and trying to make those as simple as possible. But we do enjoy that contact with customers and sellers. It's helpful to us, and we get a lot of useful feedback that way.
If I have a moment, I have been. Is everyone ready for Thorne?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, Allan's off to go get Thorne.
So what's the weirdest problem call you've had lately?
Oh.
Wow.
there's definitely some odd ones. Well, for me, because I do the email marketing, and we recently sent out a campaign to people who haven't checked the Biblio emails that have gone out in, you know, say the past 6 months or so, just to say, hey, do you still want to hear from us? Are we annoying you? Should we remove you from our list so we don't do that? And we had someone write back with like a 3-page dissertation on the nature of privacy and the fact that we should not know if they opened those emails, and I was sad. I was that they did not realize I wasn't trying to be invasive in that way, but yeah, people without a technical understanding of how the way some of those softwares work can get a little antsy about that sort of thing. So that's been a learning curve for me, because I don't want to, you know, annoy anybody.
Well, I'm surprised that person didn't realize that if you could tell if their email answered yet, then
Yeah.
you were also able just to reach in their head and know what they were thinking.
That's right.
Right.
There was no need to write back. You already knew that they were.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to jump in here and introduce and welcome one of our Rare Book Cafe co-hosts, Thorne Donnolley, who is there at the fair in another role as a real-life bookseller. You know, we are not just talking heads like Washington Week in Review. We have people who actually do this, and part of what we are broadcasting live this weekend to show you is booksellers in their native habitat. So how's it going, Thorne?
It's going great. We're having, as my function as board of directors, I've been meeting and greeting some of our new folks here, and I've been asking old friends of mine, and I've been saying, how's it going? And unanimously, everybody is saying, or almost everybody says, the best book show they've ever had. And the one or two didn't say that. They said, we're gaining on them. The crowds are good. The weather's good. My personal sales are over 100 books right now. Most of us, my personal sales have gone from $500. I have books in the thousands of dollars. So we were selling $5 books and $1,000 books. We've been selling Florida history. We've been selling first editions. Working hard at some mystery stuff, old, new, and the crowds keep coming. They've made me and all the dealers park in the grass, which is the other side of the world. I have a rental car, and I'm thinking of leaving it and telling the rental car people to come get it. It may be easier to walk home to West Palm from here, from where I'm parked. No, seriously, but it's been really good. And what has been brought to my attention last year and this year, there are so many young people here. Now, I'm 65, but under 30, 25, college. These people, I would say 1/3 of my sales have been to people, maybe half my sales to people under 35 years old. They're either new to the book business, some of them are quite knowledgeable. I got in a very elaborate discussion about points for Huckleberry Finn. So I happen to have a first edition here. The young man was very knowledgeable. It's one of the more complicated books because there's multiple editions of that thing. And he knew some of the points that a lot of people that our book dealers don't know. So it's been you get a crowd of younger people. You have I've had repeat customers. I have a friend of mine who's a employee of the state of Florida who actually it looks like we've got a banner going up in the air right now. A friend of mine who's a very large collector of Florida books who comes to see me every year, and I was able to sell him 4 of my 5 Florida books, which he had never seen before.
Wow.
This year, I brought a lot of stuff. We've got our Tom Clancy's and our 20th Century First. I brought a lot of books like I've never seen before. My personal favorite is a 1956 pamphlet. It's from the Pabst Brewing Company. I only was able to find 4 copies. I found them on WorldCat, which is, we all know, is a reference to libraries around the world. None for sale. It is a manual, a translation for salesmen from Pabst Beer to their Jewish clientele. It is how to speak Yiddish to business people. That is truly unique, and it's got some pretty interesting people looking at it. And I think we're just having a ball. I'm talking to old friends, meeting new friends, and if you take a look. I don't know what you can see behind you, Lindsay, but these aisles are full, and they keep getting. They literally, I've got to go to the bathroom a couple of times, and I found it hard to walk down one of the aisles, which is just kind of a strange thing to say, but it's really positive. A, I did make it to the bathroom, and B, it is crowded. And tomorrow, today is Earth Day. And there's a big parade downtown on the boardwalk. I don't know what you call it, St. Petersburg, near the bay. And I suspect because that was a big event in St. Petersburg, we're going to have another good day tomorrow. Weather forecast to be good. We're hours, I forget. I think they're 11 to 4 or 5, 11 to 4. And I think we're going to be seeing the same tomorrow. A lot of happy booksellers, a lot of happy a lot of happy book buyers and a lot of new faces. So I'm very pleased.
Well, Thorne,
Just for fun, I've already sent in my. Or I'm going to. I'm sorry. I've written it. The 2 minute dropped off my check for my deposit for next year. So, I don't know if that proves anything. That's what I think.
well, you spoke earlier about friendly competition. So since you and Steve Eisenstein are next to each other, do you stick your heads around a partition and taunt each other when you have a big sale?
No, because he's ahead of me this year. But what is fun is we also have another friend, William, who is across the street from us, and occasionally he and Stephanie go outside to pollute their lungs. So I'm running 2 stores, and I jokingly said that I thought he was out of earshot. I said, "Okay, 50% off everything in the store in cash for the next 5 minutes." So I got his attention. Some of his books are in the multiple of thousands, so 50% off in cash. I would have, well, depending on what it was, I could have had a nice day and left twice.
And let me also ask you, I didn't ask Steve this, but something up, but I have heard a rumor that all of you, since you face each other in the aisles, that before the show starts, you all get out in a line and you do one of those Maori warrior dances at each other. Is that really true?
It's not a Maori warrior dance. It's a secret ritual combining ancient religions, spirituality, and good book person fellowship. Yes, there's a secret handshake also involved, but we're not going to talk about it.
I'm really sorry I missed that.
What time tomorrow should we show up for that?
That's an opening day special.
Aw.
But there may be a closing ceremony too. Not sure yet. We'll have to pick that up.
Well, you should be, since you have her here literally captive on the other end of an earphone, you should be asking Amber if she knows any secret medieval bookseller curses.
Yeah, that's true. We always ask that question.
Maybe she could put a miasma over some of your competitors.
Ah, that's true. We don't have competitors. We're all friends.
That's right. That's right.
We're all the brotherhood of books. Book arts. Except for that one guy down the hall, but we'll deal with him later. We're gonna take him out. We're gonna take him out back and thump him.
Well, you always have to have one of those. There's a great short story by Saki about the summer house guest every year that all the other guests hate, and he just drives them all to distraction. And finally, the host confesses that that's how he makes sure that everyone else gets along so well.
I was just saying that's how I make sure I look good. Yeah.
They have one person that everyone can't stand, and he's the Judas Goat.
Well, that's good thinking. All righty. Well, I've got to go back to work. So I would love to seeing everybody here, and I will be happy to give you an update later on tomorrow, and maybe we can get Steve to dance. I don't know. They say white boys can't dance, but maybe Steve.
If you have any really big sales here, bring them over and make them show it to us.
I will do so. So maybe I can do a big sale right now. We have a couple possible.
Good luck.
It'll be like the car dealers who have the satisfied customers next to them.
Ah, good plan. Okay. See you guys later. Bye-bye.
All right.
Well, this is just more fun than being a clam in mud, as we used to say out in Washington State. Even not being there, it's fun. So what else are you seeing around you? Has Allan #1 wandered off, or is he just kicking back behind the camera there?
Okay. We're waiting for Edie to be free so we can join her over there. Looks like she's chatting with some folks. So.
Well, she has an uncanny ability to get people to books that they haven't told anyone about.
Yeah, we're gonna go over there and set up for her. So we'll check back in with you in a little bit.
Okay. So Allan, everyone kind of poo-pooed it, but I was arguing for a drone this year. I thought and as I look over your shoulder, you are not the first to be up on the mezzanine, and everyone says what a dazzling view of it is. So as as an important visitor to the book fair, do you think we should have a drone next year?
Why not? They can get some good live footage from that.
I think it would be.
Could, drop on some people browsing stalls.
Yeah, you could, you know,
Though is amazing. I don't know if the camera is doing it justice or not, but the lighting in and the building and just the activity around the fairs, it's wonderful.
well, our thought was that, you know, we could just kind of go around and around over the show and find people who are not busy and tell you and Amber and Alan, there's somebody with nothing to do, go talk to them.
Drop in for a quick drone interview.
Well, we would alert you guys, and you could just happen that you had showed up at the perfect moment when they didn't have anything to do.
Yeah.
We hope to attach a live camera so that we can just drop down and hover in front of them.
It'll be fun.
Well, we've had our first certifiably unfixable glitch of the day. My control panel has just vanished, so I can't as he moves from place to place. So we may from time to time just have to shout. But that's one of the things that makes this broadcasting of the first book fair on the internet. As I said at the top, we are internet personalities have not gone before. And so we just make it up as we go.
Making history and forging new ground.
In a very small way. If my mother were still here, she'd be
right down there.
if
You back that way, just a
any of
little.
the neighbors were watching. Well, it looks like we have something going on at home base.
Looks like they're getting a shot set up here.
And this is the legendary Edie Eisenstein getting ready to appear. And for those watching just now, with this the live broadcast of the second day of the 36th Florida Antiquarian Book Fair in St. Petersburg. And we are doing this live on the internet, and that's why things are happening like what you see now, where sometimes stuff just happens and we just go along. So right now,
There they are.
I don't think they are plugged in yet.
That's what they say.
That's what everybody says.
Well, anything that we ever got on the circuits, we gave to Larry. And I would probably say that she would have one of the largest collections of ephemera. Would you say that, Alan? What am I doing?
It's an earbud for you.
Okay.
So just so we can hear what they're saying.
We were eavesdropping on you two.
Oh, hey, sorry.
Welcome.
We're back.
Hello.
Let me introduce everyone to our viewing audience. I'm LindsayThompson in Charlotte. And in the mezzanine, up behind our folks in the camera here is Alan Singleton from Biblio.com, one of our sponsor here for the book fair. And seated together are two of our favorite people. On the left is Chief Book Pixie and expert in the manufacturing of medieval mead. And on the right is our own national affairs correspondent. She is part of the Rare Book Cafe team. You can see her every Saturday with us from 2:30 to 3:30 in this, our normal time slot, where she tells us about miniature books. She was the smart one out of the whole bunch of us who were on the program, and that she never has back trouble because all of her books are about 3 inches tall.
No, not that big.
Okay, so there's a couple that are 5. But I guess right now, Edie, you are giving Amber some tips on her quest, which is going to renew in a few minutes.
That's right. The touching the expensive books.
The what?
Touching of expensive books.
Touching expensive books.
That's right.
Yeah, she mentioned to us when she was on the show a few weeks ago that it was only her second book fair. And so when we got to the 3rd degree and said, what's the most expensive or rare book you've ever handled? She had a kind of a deer in the headlights moment. And we gave her a quest at this book fair to go out and find the rarest book.
Yes.
And so in our next segment, starting in about, she's going to head back out and pick up where she left off yesterday.
Okay.
The rarest book. So we figured you were giving her tips on looking for little tiny ones that might be too small to notice.
Okay.
So Edie, what have you found at the book fair so far? Have you been scooping them up right and left?
I haven't been scooping them up, but I have been seeing things that I want to scoop up, perhaps tomorrow if they're still around.
Oh, you're gonna.
I have not gone into the bibliophile alcove yet because Stephen has told me that when I go in there, I am going to find things that I want to buy. So I'm waiting for that until tomorrow, and I can figure out how much money I have to spend. The next thing is I did see a pedestal book, which I've shown before, which stands on it looks like the teacher's pedestal, and then there's a book on the top of it with a chain. I've seen a few sets of Shakespeare's miniature books in magnificent cases. I saw some beautiful things that I might want to buy, but we'll see how it goes tomorrow. Tomorrow will be my buying day. But I did buy a St. Ange book that is on St. Petersburg. Not St. Petersburg, St. Augustine. And it covers the span, and I got it, and I love it. But tomorrow we'll see. Tomorrow I'll do my buying.
Have you been egging Stephen on to sell so that you can buy more stuff tomorrow?
No. I mean, Stephen usually will say, if I feel like I can't live without it, get it. And he I know what our pocketbook is. I can't buy things for thousands of dollars that are miniatures that I have seen, but I have loved to touch them, and I love to look at them, and I have done that, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. As far as how to handle an expensive book, it used to be that you would always use white gloves. Now they say that from the white gloves, the fibers from the white gloves can damage the pages of the book. So if I see something really expensive, considering I am not just a klutz, I am a super klutz, which means I am very clumsy. And the way you want to handle any book is to make sure that you protect the spine, you protect the covers, and as you turn the pages, you want to do so very gently so that you don't rip anything or tear anything. Because like anything else, if you drop a fine piece of china, you bought it. And you don't want to do any damage to a pristine, very expensive book that belongs to somebody else.
Of course.
If you do damage to something that's your own, oh well, c'est la vie.
Well, let me tap the wisdom of all 3 of you, including Allan number 2 in the mezzanine, since you all talk to all the best people in the business. When you mentioned the white glove question, I have heard other people say in the book conserving end of the trade that gloves are a bad thing because they numb your sense of touch, and that you are more likely when turning fragile pages to actually tear one or to do other damage to it. What Just start with whoever has an answer to begin with.
It was just recently that I found out that they're not using white gloves anymore, which shows you never know everything. But what I had heard is that from the white gloves, the fibers come off and can that way diminish the value of the pages. Of course, before you're ever going to touch anything that's very, very expensive, you want to make sure that you wash and dry your hands. And you don't go at it with, without having as clean hands as possible, and be as cautious as you possibly can. Curators of rare book areas and libraries, one of the things that they love to be able to do is to have people to come and visit the rare book archives in a library to actually be able to touch the books and not just view them under glass. And that's my opinion. What do you think?
From what I've heard, although my hands-on experience is limited, from what I understand, a lot of the folks who use the white gloves now tend to be people handling metals or other things that the oils of the skin can tarnish or change. And while oils can get onto paper on the books, I've heard the same thing, is that the gloves make you not, they dull your senses so that you're not aware of the amount of pressure you're putting on a given page. So from what I understand, as long as your hands are clean and not oily or dirty, that hands are better than gloves.
Allan, to amplify on any of that?
You know, it's working at Biblio, we handle bits more than actual books. So my experience of that goes back a long way, but it's, you know, when I was in graduate school, I worked at a science library, literally like shelving books. And in some cases, they had some really, really old science journals. And I found at the end of a day of doing that, my hands were red and itching and almost blistered sometimes. And I think it was just for the acidity of the bindings on those old journals. So I was wanting gloves at that point. But that was for the other end, protecting my hands, not the journal so much.
I hadn't considered that.
And I would say that anybody that comes here to the book fair here in St. Petersburg, you will find that the dealers here are very, 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 very happy to share not only their knowledge, but their books with you.
Yes.
Of course, what they want to do is to sell. That's what they're here for. They're here to sell. But it's wonderful that whatever you look at, you can look at books worth thousands of dollars, and they're very happy to take it out and let you look at it and let you handle it and let you hold it. Very, very friendly, very, very nice.
You might be interested in this. It's not exactly a miniature book. As far as you're concerned, it might be a medium book, but I got to hold and look at an embroidered book about this tall, and it was embroidery on vellum was the cover, and it's just insane to think about that needle going through that vellum without tearing, and that it is, I think it was bound in 1906 or early 1900s.
You know what the subject was?
I believe it was a Shakespeare. I've looked at so many today, it's blurred, but I think
it was Sonnets of Shakespeare.
Yeah. It was just gorgeous. I mean, flowers along the spine and on the cover, and you know, and just I was ogling it under glass, and the seller was nice enough to bring it out and put it in my hand so I could just, wow.
I mean, there were several copies, signed copies have gone with the wind that are over $10,000, you know, and I mean, you know, it's wonderful to be able to see these books and to look at them and to appreciate the art in them and the illustrations in them. It's extraordinary.
It is.
Extraordinary.
Absolutely.
I love it. And the people you meet. Look, you could meet the two of us.
We're pretty cool.
But No, it is. It's a lot of fun. The fair is wonderful. I can't offer one criticism of the fair. The people here are fantastic. They go out of their way to help you.
Oh, one thing I will say that is a marker for how well the fair is doing is that the ATM is out of cash.
Oh,
So if you're coming here, load up before you get here because the ATM is currently out of cash. They've got someone on the way to refill it. So
They're bringing more cash from what we
that's
hear.
right. That's right.
That's
So
good
things are
news.
going well.
yeah, it is. We're having a wonderful.
Well, that sounds like it could be a selling point for you guys, that when you guys show up for a book fair, they run out of money.
That's yeah. No, I did that. That's me. I'll take credit. Sure.
The two of you could just say every book fair we appear at turns to gold.
Yeah. No, it's
And we'll
very-
never be able to go to another one, so we preserve the streak.
That's right.
And then, of course, you meet people here from all over. I don't know if there's anybody here from Europe this year,
I haven't noticed. Mostly U.S. sellers.
but it's from all over the United States, and it's interesting to see what sells in one area as compared to another area, or the dealer-to-dealer sales are wonderful. So you know that the books that you're buying are good because the other dealers are buying them too. Someone from California might want something that we're selling in Florida and vice versa. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
As I say, super clutch CD.
Actually, those are rented earphones, and when each segment is about to end, they fall out of your ear.
Oh, okay.
That's how we know it's time to move on.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's time now for Amber to get ready to renew her quest for the rarest book. Edie, it's always a joy to see you. You are the best part of our program every week, and you have not failed us today.
Thank you, and it's always good to be seen. I'm so glad that I'm still here to be seen.
That's right.
Yeah. And then I got to meet Amber. In person. Yes, wonderful.
So we will check back with you again tomorrow to hopefully see what you have acquired, or I imagine you're going to be cagey and dole it out little by little in future shows, week by week.
Oh yes, that you know that I'm going to show and tell. You know that I always show and tell. My pleasure.
Well, Amber, then get on your medieval armor and
I shall.
go forth and slay dragons.
Woohoo!
Very good. Thank you. What have you found so far?
So, Alan, do you collect anything particularly, or is this are you more of a reader who likes lots of books?
I'm not a collector these days, or really, I've never been a collector per se. But when I was in graduate school, was buying a lot of books out of necessity, and comparative religion, Chinese religions. About the most extravagant thing I did was to buy a full set of the Taoist canon when my wife and I were in China and had that shipped back. It was about 36 volumes, more an encyclopedia than a canon. They didn't kick anything out, so it was just year after year they added to the canon and preserved hundreds of works of Chinese philosophy and literature that would have been lost otherwise.
Oh, well, it's a fascinating field that I pretend to know little about. I have a glancing acquaintance with some haiku authors, and occasionally interesting things come along. Recently, I had an unusual edition of Zen and English literature, which was a first edition published in English in Tokyo in 1942, just as the war was beginning. And how that managed to get out of the country and survive, I have no idea.
Wow, that is amazing.
But a friend of mine in Indiana snapped that up, and it was nice to find a good home for it. But that's the I think graduate students are collectors on the cusp. If we've ever done any kind of advanced study in a field, that bug may strike at any point in life when those old interests reignite.
You never know when you'll get sucked back into that, into the whirlpool of. Yeah. At the time, it was a bit of an obsession. I would just go out and, field that you haven't seen before is just out at you, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. I haven't read that before, seen that before, and it may prove to be, remarkably uninteresting in the end. But just the newness of it is exciting.
Now, do you think that this is Eastern and Asian texts like that are an area that will not be easily digitized, such that there will always be perhaps even a greater than usual demand as everything goes on the internet, simply because it's harder to recreate in an internet viewable form? For example, your 36 volumes, would you expect to see that on the internet nowadays?
That's a good question if anybody's digitized that. I know when I was studying, that was something I was really keenly interested in, because I was trying to do textual comparison, and having digital copies of the various texts that I was looking at was really, really important. And I did a little bit of work trying to write some programming to take a chunk of a text and search through other texts for similar passages.
Mm-hmm.
In a pretty rudimentary way, but was able to use that pretty effectively to tease out clues about two texts that I suspected were related, but couldn't nail it down. And then through doing that, was able to identify 3 or 4 passages. And then when I looked at them more closely, some of that would be sort of a dry hole, or sometimes I would find, wow, all right, this is clearly a case where they're either both quoting from an earlier text, quoting from the other. And it's advanced a good bit since I was in graduate school and studying this, which was mid-90s. But Taoist studies, there's still huge swaths of it where there are hundreds or thousands of texts that we know very little about, and we're still trying to place them in a tradition or really iron out when they were written. I spent a lot of time working on a commentary to the Tao Te Ching, and it was one that had previously been lost, and was rediscovered by R.L. Stein, a British explorer, in the caves in Dunhuang in the 1920s. And prior to that, there were references to the text and other texts, but there was not an extant copy of it. He literally found a scroll in a cave in Dunhuang. We're able to date that back to, I think the scroll itself was maybe 600 or 700 AD. And just bits of text like that are kind of constantly being unearthed. And in a lot of cases, they change the landscape about the tradition.
Well, I'm constantly amazed at how much of all forms of history and knowledge really are a function of pure accident in that way.
Yeah.
Things that survive sometimes, or for that matter, books that are considered rare, are not always necessarily rare on their merits. They're rare because they lucked out and somebody saved a copy somehow.
And they have to survive, right?
We value this because this is all we know.
Right.
We know, for example, that Aristophanes, all the Greek playwrights have immense amounts of work that was lost. And we, on Steve Eisenstein's show, the few months ago, we had a conservator at the new library in Alexandria, Sharif Afifi, and he was telling us how when the original Great Library was burned, the only copy in the world of the complete works of Aeschylus just went up in smoke. And what we have is what you described, reconstructions from other people who copied bits or all of themselves, just happened not to get burned in one wave of depredations or another. And I think the most tragic cases are the ones where we, like Achilles or Sappho, just a few lines, but even in those few lines, they drive people crazy wanting to know what the rest was.
Right. We know enough to know what we don't know or what we would like to wish was preserved.
That's one of Donald Rumsfeld's conundrums, although I don't think he reads much Archilochus. So do you pursue any of those studies these days, or even
No, I don't. Every few years, I kind of want to get my hand back in there and just try to keep my Chinese somewhat fresh, or at least from falling completely by the wayside. And then also, I enjoyed translation probably more than anything else, and was able to translate bits of text here or there, and really found that to be rewarding and interesting. That's something that I would kind of like to get back to, but of work to get back up to speed, at least to be able to do that again. But the kids are a little bit older and a bit more free to. It seems a little less far-fetched to think about doing that.
Well, that would be the Chinese tradition, is that you take up these things again as later in life. You're a wise old Mandarin with the kids all launched, and you can pick up your studies once again and with the insights of longer life.
Right. So either that or become a hermit.
Well, one thing, since we have a few minutes here while I guess Allan and Amber are passing through a valley of doubt in their quest, one thing that probably a lot of our viewers might be interested in is when we think about learning foreign languages, Americans tend to think, oh, that's too hard, and then B, why do I need to? Everybody in the world speaks English. But the problem or the challenge is doubled, if not redoubled, by use of different alphabetical systems, or in the case of Chinese, a pictographic system. How do you approach learning a language that's based on an entire different way of vision and thinking than you're accustomed to?
Yeah. I think immersion is just hugely important for that. At least for me, it was. I went over to Taiwan to teach English and begin learning Chinese. With really hadn't studied it at all before, and it was able to learn fairly rapidly. As a spoken language, it's really not that bad. The pronunciation is difficult, but the grammar is quite simple and not very different from English in word order. So, if you can use that maybe as a hook to start, then with that as a basis, it's not as unrealistic to start learning the written language. And that's how it worked for me anyway. But it was a lot of fun to speak.
Well, I think Allan, looks like Allan and Amber have landed somewhere. They have reached the top of another mountain on which rests another book yogi. And so let's go find out what they have found.
Well, we've got William Hutchison from William Hutchison Books here, and he has handed me this beautiful vellum copy. Guido Guidi's Anatomy. Oh. Published in 1611. I keep losing my earbud. Bear with me. I'm trying to keep both hands on the book. So, all right. So, there we go. Aha, technical assistance. So what we have here, as you can see, got surgery books and ancient Latin, and it's definitely, so far, I think the most expensive book I've handled. And it's all in Latin. I can only read a handful of words.
Yes.
It has pictures, which helps. So.
What is the illustration you just showed us? It appeared to be different from someone's head from here.
Yes, I believe it was the muscles of the face and the head.
Ah.
Oh, I turned right back to it. So I don't know if it'll focus on that, but
You may need to interpret.
well, I'm rough on my Latin, so but there's also old cards and surgery procedures from, I think this was the 1600s. So, and here we have, I believe, I'm not sure what I'm looking at, but it's beautiful.
Oh. Perhaps that's early European, the Inca method of brain surgery.
Yes. We also have here the General History of America by Herrera, 1725. And this is a lovely small handheld book. Histories of the vast continent and islands of America, commonly called the West Indies, from the first discovery thereof. They don't do titles like they used to, do they? They just keep going, fill up an entire page. But this is definitely moving on up in my quest here, and this is just in gorgeous condition.
First English translation
Ah, the first English translation.
of a 17th century history of the Spanish.
History of the Spanish in America, 17th century. So. And with that, oh, I did not notice this. There is a fold out. Whoa. Oh, isn't that something? Here we are. There's a fold out map.
Golly.
In the pages of the book. Wow. Of Mexico, New Spain, Terra Firma, the Antilles. Well, that is something special. I'm going to carefully, very carefully, return this to as it was. Here we are. So, there we go. William Hutchison Books is helping me on my quest.
Wonderful. Well, thank Bill for us. He's been our coolest guest on the program so far. Outside of Starbucks. And he looked like the ultimate urban hipster bookseller.
You're apparently the coolest guest they've had, so.
So do you
So thank you very much, and we'll check back in later with some more books.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll look forward to it. I asked you before the break there, Alan, am I recalling correctly that one of the tricks to Chinese is that some of it is inflection based, and so that
Yes.
convey a different meaning.
It's tones, and for any syllable, what we might hear is the same syllable, ma or ma. Those are actually different syllables, and there are 4 tones plus a neutral tone that's not used as often, but just completely distinct meanings based on the tone. But beyond that, that's probably the trickiest thing to get with Chinese as a spoken language. The basic word order is really similar to English, and the grammar is all based on word order. There's no conjugation.
Mm-hmm.
So with a little bit of vocabulary and kind of an understanding of syntax and word order, you can start to speak really easily without having to worry about verb tense and subject-object agreement. You're just stringing words together. We tomorrow go store. They yesterday go store. And it's all the same. When I was in graduate school, I had to learn a little bit of German to pass a reading exam in it. And that was just like the polar opposite. I found it to be an absolute nightmare. And that everything was inflected. It's not just verb tense, but even, nouns based on their role in the sentence, whether they're a direct object, indirect object, would have a different ending or inflection. And trying to get my head around that after Chinese was really difficult. Did not appreciate it.
Well, I think everywhere the landscape is littered with traps like that.
Yeah.
I heard Garrison Keillor once in a show when I was living in Portland, Oregon in the 80s, and he remarked that the landscape of the state was just strewn with traps for the unwary that would let the locals suss you out as being a tourist. For example, Couch Street in Portland is Cooch, and it is not the Willamette River that runs through Portland, but Willamette. And they're just those Americanized versions of "ha, gotcha,"
Right.
that you find in virtually any language. Probably come everywhere.
Points of identification for the novice, right?
In Illinois, you do not go to Cairo; you go to Cairo, and in Kentucky, you go to Versailles.
Not Versailles.
Yeah. People will think you eat croissants for breakfast.
If you say Versailles.
As Versailles, Kentucky. Well, let me ask you, Tack. You live in Asheville, which has become the city that the North Carolina General Assembly dislikes almost as much as Charlotte, but for slightly different reasons. I remember I lived on the West Coast for 30 years, and when I came back in 2008, I was astonished at how Asheville had flowered, because when I was in high school in the 70s, you could not get a copy of Look Homeward Angel in the Asheville Public Library. People were still irked at Thomas Wolfe writing that kind of stuff about them.
Right.
So what was that part of what drew you there, or is it something you've come to appreciate over time? Do you have literary haunts or bookstores there?
My wife and I moved there in '98, and we both went to undergrad in Chapel Hill, and it kind of traveled through Asheville several times on our way to wherever we were going. We were in grad school in Chicago for a long time, and for whatever reason would end up stopping through Asheville, pretty frequently, and had friends who were thinking about settling there. And we had just always wanted to end up there, both the mountains, and maybe not so much the literary history of Asheville, but just the cultural roots that it has, and the art scene were big draws. And you know, in '98 it was already probably a good 6 or 8 years kind of into its turnaround. You know, in the '70s and '80s, although we weren't there, from everything I hear, you know, downtown was a ghost town, and they even at one point thought about bulldozing downtown Asheville and putting up a shopping mall. Luckily, they did not. So, you know, that was a draw for us, just the cultural history and being in a town that had sort of a vibrant downtown, although when we moved there, it was nothing like what it is now. And, you know, lately as well, the brewery scene in Asheville is really interesting. I'm a home brewer, so that's kind of interesting to see how much is happening just with local beer production. It seems like anywhere you go now, you can find you know, a local brewery. That production has kind of gone from being a huge factory, corporate-driven enterprise to, you know, a craft enterprise really quickly. That's been interesting to see that happen in Asheville.
Well, I suppose everyone is exercised this week over the General Assembly killing the brew bill.
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought that would go through. They had a bill they were trying to pass, I think, to allow small to mid-sized brewers to produce more per year and continue to self-distribute. Mm-hmm. And from what I heard, there are not many Asheville breweries who are yet bumping up against that limit. There were some in the Triangle area, I think, but it was obviously something they were concerned about because it's going to be in their path of future growth. And as I understood it, the lobbyists for the distributors kind of carried the day on that and got the bill killed, but that was disappointing.
Yeah, it's a big issue here in Charlotte. There are a number of brewers who have hit the 25,000 barrel cap, and you know, I find it a little baffling at one level because I rolled into Portland, Oregon in 1980, just as the craft brewing movement was getting started in the Pacific Northwest, and lived out there for almost. It has become one of the great jewels of the region.
Yeah.
The revelation of what beer could be was something 2 years prior to that, where you could still find things like the Hook Norton Brewery near Oxford, which produced Hook Norton Bitter and Old Hooky, which you could only get at 2 pubs in Hook Norton Village itself. And then to come back to America and find, you know, the standard beers that all tasted alike. I got to Portland and discovered you could actually get Guinness there, and I thought, hallelujah, I'm saved. And so just from a grown-up beverage consuming standpoint, it seems like more choice is a good and logical thing, and arguably better choices. But I guess Easterners will always be with us. We have so many issues getting resolved by the smallest and fastest depopulating counties who think if it's in a big city, then it must be wicked.
Yeah, and the legislature just seems to have an axe to grind with Asheville and Charlotte in particular.
Well, you guys especially. I mean, they've tried to take over the water system up there, and of course this year they've told the city council, "Do it yourself, or we're going to do it for you." Of course, they tried it last year, and it was such a reach that even they couldn't pass it with a supermajority.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that they will be stopped again, but they really do seem to want to press that issue again. And it's puzzling to me because it's just the opposite of local control and local say. I mean, if Asheville wants to do that, they're free to do it whenever they want to.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to have it just imposed from the outside it's crazy.
Well, it's I think you're particularly lucky in Asheville as opposed to Charlotte in that you have bookstores up there. There's Captain's, the rare book dealer, and of course Malaprop for the not only the quality of its holdings, but the authors it brings in. And that's something we do not have in Charlotte. We are a culture of banking and shipping things. And for a city that's the second fastest growing in the country, I feel like I'm doing missionary work here because we are a surprisingly underbooked city when it comes to good bookshops. You can really count them on the fingers of one hand. And when the annual best of ratings come around, it's essentially the same 3 or 4 stores just passing the trophy around from year to year to year. So when I have known about Biblio forever, but I never knew where it was. And when you and Amber were coming on our weekly show, I was astonished to discover you're just up the road. But then
That's right.
Asheville, of course.
Yeah, we feel lucky to live there and really enjoy it. I guess in a lot of ways, Biblio could have started in a lot of places, but it makes sense that it's in Asheville and it's been a happy home there.
So who put it there? How did it end up in the mountains?
Yeah, well, Brendan Shearer, who started Biblio, he and his wife had a bookstore in Waynesville, North Carolina.
Oh, yes.
About 30 minutes west of Asheville. And he was running that bookstore, but also learning to code, and then kind of had the idea to create a marketplace for book search. The first iteration of Biblio was more a meta search engine.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sort of morphed that into a full-on marketplace. And he was working at the newspaper in Asheville, and then kind of started the Biblio marketplace up, kind of running that out of his garage, and saw some pretty quick early growth. I was also working at the Citizen Times at the same time, and kind of came on to help him try to grow it and sort of get it out of the. It's basically grown from there.
Mm-hmm.
Really, just him being in the area brought it home, and we've never really
The blurb will tell you a little bit
to move anywhere else.
about how
It looks like we have some action on the quest.
It
Yes.
does.
All right.
So
The
let me
quest-
jump back to the big screen here. Amber has reached a new mountaintop in her quest. Where are you now?
I am with Mike Slicker at Lighthouse Books, and this one is not necessarily the most expensive, but I could not resist because I am a huge Aubrey Beardsley fan. And we've got the first edition of Aubrey Beardsley's first major work, La Mort d'Arthur, and it is beautiful, and here we go. Here's a great example of the beautiful illustrated pages by Aubrey Beardsley, and it is one of 1,000 copies of his first major work. And being both a big fan of the tale of Arthur and the art of Aubrey Beardsley, I could not pass up this opportunity at all. So.
And the William Morris sort of design.
Yes, William Morris design. Now, see, I'm not completely familiar with that, but this is in the style of Kelmscott. Yes. So this is just. I want to take it home.
That's easy enough.
Easy enough.
It can be done for a price.
Got any dishes need doing? So yeah, just I don't know if it'll zoom in enough to see and appreciate the beautiful illustrations and these marbled covers and oh.
Well,
Very much.
it may not be the rarest, but certainly adding to the experience is that you are in the presence of one of the founders of the book fair, Michael
Founders
Smith,
of the book fair.
who is celebrating his 40th year in the business.
And he can't hear and he can't hear a word you're saying. So, you know.
That's for our larger, that's for our larger audience. We've talked before, and I think he remembers he's been in business 40. So
They say they think you might remember you've been in business 40 years, but they just wanted to check and make sure. So yes, it's a lovely, lovely nook and a lively nook. So, but thank you for taking the time to let me handle these beautiful books.
Yeah. Delighted you came back.
All right, so
where are
maybe
you
some
headed
more?
now?
Oh, I don't know. We're meandering, so we'll see.
You have about
We're going to go see a printing operation.
so
What was that time limit? I missed that. Sorry.
you have about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Well, we will be quick, and we will be back with you soon.
So just pick a booth and tell them you need some.
We'll do it. I'll do that.
Well, I appreciate you keeping me company here during these lacunae in the show, Alan. It's very generous of you when you could be down schmoozing with folks.
Well, just curious, who are the other booksellers in Charlotte that kind of are on a par with you, or that you know there?
Well, I would reframe the question in terms of my being on a par with nobody, simply because I am a very small operation, purely on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of a blip at this point. I've been in business for a couple of years, and I came to books like most booksellers through something else. I was a trial lawyer for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
And finally, which is why I can talk endlessly about nothing and make it sound important. But I basically a career around books. Between college, graduate school, and law school, I spent 9 years in higher education.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to graduate school in England in 1978, that was my first real exposure to antiquarian books and the possibility of book collecting. I grew up in a little town called Shelby, west of Charlotte, where we had some book racks in some of the department stores, pretty much the measure of local culture. So, getting to a place like Oxford where there were actual antiquarian book stores, and of course the vast expanse of all the Bodleian libraries, where it seemed like you could call up anything and it would come up from the bowels of the earth in the Western Library, was a remarkable revelation. And then I went out to the West Coast to Portland, which was a dazzling bookstore town. Even now, there's been a lot of consolidation, a lot of dealers out of business, but Portland, of course, has books, and my which is in the Multnomah neighborhood where I used to live. And Bobby Tishner, who started Annie Balloons in the 70s, was another recovering lawyer. We have a game we played where I would pick out new books that came in and offer her 35 or 40% off to save her the trouble of selling it to me for less in a year's time. When Mark Halperin's Winter's Tale came out, I said, Bobby, no one's going to buy this but me. So, let me give you $11 for it now, and it's money in your pocket. And she would say, no, somebody's going to snap it up. It's getting great reviews. And a year later, when in the annual book sale, I paid her about $11. And because I kept a list, I was able to say, see, told you.
Oh, boy.
But she, that was another real revelation because Annie Bloom's was the first bookstore I'd ever seen that really was heavily invested in poetry. Small press books, big publishers. And then in Seattle, once I moved there, Bailey Coy Books, which now sadly is gone, and Elliott Bay Books, which happily lives, were great sources where you could go in and find literally acres of poetry. And I would go in and say to myself, I think I need to know more Galway Kinnell. So they had it. They had the collected. And it looks like Allan is back, but he's still sidelong, so it's
Sideways. While they sort
top
that,
side.
what were you studying at Oxford?
Looks like, what have you got here, Amber?
All right, I'm here with Imperial Fine Books from New York, and we've got Days and Hours in a Garden. It is a beautiful hand-painted book from I think it said 1895, and it is just lovely. It's so tight it's as if it was never open. By EBB, and it is just a lovely illustrated copy with these hand-painted covers that just look like a watercolor daydream. And it's the rough binding, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Just a little look at different popular garden flowers in a Victorian garden and such. So that's what they had to share with us. So I've really kind of run the gamut of different kinds of beautiful and valuable and rare books. And I really appreciate this quest opportunity you put me on. This has been fun.
That's a really fascinating niche. From that time period, the Victorians had a fascination with flowers and elaborate coded language that was used to express messages. There were even gardens planted according to flower codes.
Yes, and it even covers, I see right here, little spots of superstitions about particular flowers, and I'm familiar with some of them, but definitely not the ins and outs of that very intricate kind of subtext of Victorian etiquette. So I think that's it for now, and it's thank you, Imperial Fine Books from New York City.
Oh my goodness! Well, welcome to the South.
That's right.
Well, thank you for giving us another hour in your quest, and happily we still have some time tomorrow for a last-minute plumbing of the depths of the book fair. And at this point, I'm sure Allan's battery is running low, so we're going to set both of you free. And thank you so much for joining us, and Allan and I will chat a bit here until Kara joins us.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot. Great day.
I read philosophy, politics, and economics, and it's called PPE, which is generally called the politician's degree in Britain, and a lot of my friends have either become politicians or lawyers. You pick two of the three. Generally, you can be a show-off and read all three, but I picked philosophy and politics because I had done both in college. And if you ask my principal tutor at Mansfield College, Dr. Frieden, he would tell you, however, that study seemed to be rowing and drinking ale.
Of course.
There was Oxford is a wonderful library town and a wonderful pub town, and the two exist pretty much cheek by jowl.
Did you study that knowing that you wanted to go into law afterwards, or did that come later?
Did I what?
Did you study that at Oxford knowing you wanted to go to law school?
I had always thought about going to law school. I really wanted to go into newspaper work. My parents were Depression era babies, and they like many of that ilk, saw their children taking on jobs that were secure and would last forever. And in a way, they were right, because had I gone into newspaper work, I would have been laid off as a senior editor about 5 years ago. On the
or
other
sooner. Yeah.
is rapidly being replaced by computers. And I began to see that even when I gave up practice about 10 years ago. I had begun in 1985 when it cost about $1,000 to incorporate a company because you had to do everything. You had to type up the articles of incorporation. It was generally a more slow, one-off, bespoke kind of process. 25 years later, it was a one-page form you could download off the internet. And I would just hand the form to clients and say, it's cheaper for you to do this yourself. And I saw the handwriting on the wall. So I enjoyed it for a while. It seemed like the more, particularly trial work, the less fun it became because I was just dealing in larger and larger sums of other people's money being fought over. And it just, you get a sense in every case when you're being played by one part, they've got a separate game going on, and the lawyers they're using to try and gain what they want out of it. And finally I thought, I can do this, kill me. So I just shut the doors and walked away, did a variety of other things for a few years. And then finally, about when I was running a homeless shelter, of all things, for the Salvation Army, they had a book, one of their thrift stores down the street, a book section that was pretty much the greatest hits of the 1970s, and they sold absolutely zero books. So out of sheer boredom and having learned that they were throwing away deaccession books from the library system because they didn't have anybody who knew what to do with them, I bullied them into letting me take over the book section. And within 6 months, I was generating 30%. So I began to think, well, maybe there's something to this. And I finally I had very few members of my family left to embarrass. And I thought, I'm just going to jump in this and do it. And so I set up as a bookseller online. I thought initially do it in an actual store with an online. Charlotte grows so fast that you cannot take a 5-year lease anywhere and expect to be there at the end of 5 years. You will be the foundation of a condo. And so I've become happy doing it online, and particularly with video conferencing, I can show you the book. We can talk. If you want to see more particulars, snap pictures and email them to you. And it's not the real life experience, but it's kind of like what you do. It's in many ways the next best thing.
Yeah.
And while we were chatting, Kara Accettola has joined us.
Hi.
Welcome, Kara. She is with Little Sages Books in the Fort Lauderdale area. Great expert in ephemera, which does not mean the interview is over. And right now, Kara, you know Alan Singleton, I think.
I don't know if we've met because this is his first Florida Fair, so I don't think so. I know Brendan well, and I know Amber, and don't know Alan.
Well, now
wait, Alan with Biblio, is that Mr.?
This is Alan Singleton with Biblio. We have him.
For a second, I really went, wait a minute, maybe that's not even who. Yeah, we have.
We have him.
I'm a good fan, of course.
We have him stashed in the mezzanine. And
yeah, great place.
I know you
right now running very low on batteries, so I'm gonna have to sign off. But thanks, I really enjoyed talking, and the view from the fair up here, and
good.
over the chat. Thank you.
Well, in your neck of the woods, is a modicum of normal returning to life?
It is a bit, actually. My mom just called, and I was just telling her that, today is a lot different of a day. It feels calm, and it feels good. Chloe's still settling in, and it feels right. Yesterday was a bit painful and emotional, but today is a lot better. Yeah.
Well, we should probably clue in our viewers that you have had both good news in the arrival and the sad departure of a much-loved cat.
Right. Yes. So those were always hard moments. I've had a lot really warm outpouring of you know, just support and care from community far and wide. So that's really nice to see. That's the beauty of this technology. You were talking to Mr. Singleton about. I forgot his first name. That's why he became a Mr. But yeah, we've had a good day. It's a little gray today, so the lighting's a little diffused, and we moved my husband moved some things around yesterday to kind of do an evening wake, you know, for Yuri as we just kind of celebrated and you know, his life, and the house feels really good today. I'm almost surprised because I had anticipated more pain because I've done this before, you know, lost a pet, and must be right. It just must have been right. He went to the But let's get back to the fair. I have to say I haven't really watched much yet, but just the peripheral of friends that I have seen on the serves, and like the community seems to be reporting that it's ridiculous out there. Ridiculous, as the youngsters say, like as in great. That it's nonstop, that the parking lot is overflowing, that there is a bunch of young people on the floor, which if it's someone's first Florida fair, that may be surprising to them, because it really is, as you know, a very diverse crowd and a very accessible demographic of dealers. I mean, even though the Bowmans are there who have a shop on Madison Avenue, there's really great material there, but it is still just awesome. Hold on one second. Someone's asking me a question.
Well, I'll take this moment to remind our viewers that you're watching the live coverage of the second day of the 36th annual Florida Antiquarian Book Fair at the Coliseum in St. Petersburg. A beautiful Art Deco building built in 1924. You can rent it for weddings and dances, but this weekend, over 100 different book dealers from all over the East Coast are gathered there with thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of books. Not all of them extremely expensive. They truly run the gamut from a few dollars to a few thousand. And while you were attending to other things, Kara, we dropped in on Steve and Edie Eisenstein, both of whom echo what you have, your reports. They say that books have been flying out. Thorne said he was trying to get down to the restroom a couple of times and had to fight his way through the crowds.
Yeah.
He said at least a third to a half of the people in his alcove are what seem like young people to him and me.
Awesome.
And apparently it is truly just an enormous crowd. Of course, we saw that yesterday when we broadcast the opening, and for a good 15 or 20 minutes, there was just a steady, unstoppable stream like Walmart on a Black Friday morning of people coming in intent on buying books.
Yep. I have to say, thinking back to all the years I've done it, you know, Friday you get really excited, but I think Saturday's the strongest. Saturday and Sunday are my favorite days there. Saturday is so strong. It's just so thick with everybody, you know. Not a lot of people have maybe other things they do on a Friday night, but on a Saturday day, the St. Pete locals, you know, they are all for rolling down to whatever the festival du jour is, and just being right there downtown, having maybe a farmer's market morning, a great lunch, and rolling into the fair is, even for the casual visitor, a really great day. So it's good to hear that that's holding true this year, and that Saturday is really, really strong. I can't wait to hear about the door. You know, when Sarah releases those door numbers, that's really exciting, even though it's not a numbers game. But it is in a way, because if regional fairs are starting to see, you know, upticks, and regional fairs whose, you know, death knoll was being told in very recent years, and, you know, you look at an old fine books, and I have old fine books magazines, as everybody does, and A.B. Bookman's, and I always like to look 10 years back and look at the exact issue from a decade ago and kind of gauge the market by the ads in the back. And once in a while I'll see, you know, a fair like the Santa Fe, New Mexico Antiquarian Fair that I'm like, where the heck did that one go? And it, you know, kind of have to mourn the losses of these great regional and provincial fairs. So to see them strong and healthy really that trickles down and trickles up and speaks to the whole trade having, you know, renewed vibrancy. It's really exciting.
And of course, one of the things that we're blessed by these days is Cynthia Gibson's work with bookfair.com. She had the inspired idea of gathering together information on all the book fairs pretty much in the world in one website. And she's been a guest and a colleague on the show many times, and has made us all aware of how almost anywhere in America you're within a day's drive of a book fair every weekend of the year.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Ask my husband. I was really starting to aggravate him. Oh, I could go, oh, I could, you know, and as, of course, as an exhibitor, you look at your calendar, and if you don't already have something on the docket and you see that, gee, a little JetBlue ticket, and you could be exhibiting in this city in Massachusetts or that city in New York, it's really tempting to not just fill the schedule with book fairs. And that's great for our country and for, you know, our bibliophilic community that we have. You know, England is similar. There's a lot of smaller fairs repeating, or they have, I don't know if our cities can, New England can sustain it. And some of the California cities can sustain it, the larger cities. But, you know, they'll have 3-time-a-year fairs in the same city. And it's waiting an entire year for a fair. I mean, the organizers certainly don't want to be asked to do it twice. I don't think so. But waiting a whole year is really kind of tough on the locals. And like you almost might get some drop off, even though the excitement builds. But if you had a, you know, a quarterly or 3 times a year in the same space, think of what that does to where you can put that on the calendar, or at least a winter-summer version. But with proximity in some of these little clusters of lots of cities, you can have an almost similar effect. I mean, if you follow Getman's shows, you know, every couple of weeks you can be in another, you know, Lexington or, you know, or Boston multiple times, and you can just kind of dance around some of these areas where there's some frequency. We have to wait, and we can drive up to Georgia, you know, in the fall for the Georgia Fair. But we've got far distances in these southern cities, as you know, so we can't even always do all of our regional fairs. It's just as much work for me to go to the Virginia Fair in the Southeast chapter than it is to, you know, fly to Concord, New Hampshire.
I think that's part of why we really don't have anything going in the Carolinas yet, because we have little pockets that are very active and devoted, like the Triangle area, Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Charlotte, and Asheville, or Columbia, Charleston. But there's no critical mass where it's easy to get all those together in one place.
Exactly. But boy, would that be I would love to see a great Appalachian Fair or a great North Carolina Fair. I mean, you'd get all the Ohio dealers, you'd get all the mid-Atlantic seaboarders in, you'd get the southern dealers coming up, and you would easily get all the northeastern dealers to carve down, because if they'll come to Florida, for heaven's sake, they'll go into the Carolinas. So that would be great. And
I have wondered why nobody has really tackled that yet, because Charlotte is so keen for World City experiences, and we are so system, both as a shipping center, which means we are crisscrossed by interstates going everywhere, and America. So it seems like there's an opportunity there that you and your friends should jump on.
Absolutely. It's true. I think a year or two ago, it must have only been last year, we actually started to kind of get everybody excited about this. I think Amber was, you know, I mean, totally off the record. Now it's on there, you know, she was like, that's something that, you know, we could kind of look into in that Asheville area. They could sponsor it possibly, that kind of thing. Let's do it. Yeah.
Oh, I would think an Asheville show would be an amazing draw, either in early spring or fall when the weather is at its best.
Exactly. Oh, that'd be really, really cool. Yep, that's one for the powers that be to start looking into and start whispering in people's ears. Yeah, absolutely. But it really, a lot of these fairs that take the Georgia Fair, you know, our nearest neighbors, you know, that fair had I don't remember how many years it's been around, but everybody remembers when it was like a giant convention center, and you know, you heard, you know, And some of the people who are on the floor of the Florida Fair this weekend, Josh Neesey and Mallory and a bunch of the other, GABA people, David Hamilton, they have really done a lot of work to breathe new life into that. For the last couple years, that's been going strong and getting tied into literary events at college or different kind of combinations. Finding a location is always really pivotal, but they're breathing new life into that. So I believe in regional fairs. Yeah.
Well, I've gotten acquainted with a lot of our Georgia friends through the Rare Book Cafe, and it's really remarkable what they have going down there. I hesitate to name favorites, but my favorite is Libby Ware at Toad Lily Books.
Oh, yes. I love Libby. Yes.
Not only is she just funny as all get out, but she has such an eclectic range of specializations that she covers.
Yeah.
That are kind of counterintuitive for a southern city in some ways. And she's also an author, which is really unusual among booksellers.
Her book has just been sweeping and killing it for years, because last year at the fair, I think she was pretty excited about, I don't remember if it was just being released or she was already picking up her first very notable LGBTQ, award. And she's just written all these different amazing avenues of opportunity for that book and just keeps getting accolades. I'm ashamed to say I have not that much of a reader, ironically. But, I don't have that much time for pleasure reading. But
it's a first-rate book, and she was scooping up awards last year and nominations even faster.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most amazing things just in my lifetime, both as an occupant of the earth and as a reader and then a book dealer.
Mm-hmm.
The LGBT niche developed both from a collecting standpoint and from a publishing standpoint, because we're only 60 years since Patricia Highsmith published her first novel. And then I had to disavow it. It was her second novel, Love Story, and she published under a pseudonym because her publisher was afraid it would destroy her career, and she denied she had written it for something like 40 years.
Wow.
When the first gay and lesbian bookstores began to open in the late 60s, they actually had trouble finding enough books to stock the shelves with.
Right. Yeah.
At that point, the post office could still swoop in and declare things obscene just because.
Right.
Take them all away.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. A great pocket of that history is here locally. We have the Stonewall Museum in Wilton Manors, but I learned a lot about that era, all the difficult eras, but the more recent eras of difficulty. Ann Arbor's collection really highlights some of the 20th century, like the literary paths, where, watching how those unfold. So we've got a lot of good things finally happening, but not so many in North Carolina. You guys are holding some.
Well, it's actually been interesting because HB2 has, if anything, reinvigorated the notion of the bookstore as a third place in the community. And right away, as soon as it was passed, the owners of Malaprop Books in Asheville had an op-ed in the New York Times, said, boycott what you like, but don't go boycott bookstores here.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And they and Scuppernong Books in Winston-Salem and a couple of the Research Triangle area bookstores went out and got Garth Greenwell and a number of other newly published gay and lesbian authors, and in effect booked them on a barnstorming tour of North Carolina as a sort of in-your-face to HB2.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's great. So yeah,
we all had high hopes that wiser heads would prevail. Instead, we have just made a deal with the devil to bring back sports, and the rest of us have gotten a little pat on the forehead and say, now go away. And then after the next election, when we can run against you again, we may take up whether to let you have a law. And I think that has made the relevance of books of all sorts at the forefront again, because writing and communicating with others is how we are heard and how we make things change. And I've been astonished at how particularly poetry has had kind of a revival in the last year or two, as people rediscover its value as a means of protest.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. More to that later, actually. Our very own, our very own assistant director for the ABAA, who is no longer as of Friday, he has moved on to Pen America. So that's another conversation. So we're really proud of him for moving on to the nexus of where literary expression and activism are really doing great things for freedom. But Forrest is jumping in. Speaking of poetry and slam poetry and spoken word, Forrest is, really involved in his Massachusetts community where that's concerned. But you can talk about that or anything. Hi, Forrest.
Hey.
Well, why not remind our viewers who may not know him personally just who Forrest is?
Yes.
One or
Forrest?
The other.
Well, Forrest, jump in and talk about Jocelyn Hall, Rare Books.
Okay. This is my first time live on the internet. I'm a little discombobulated. Yeah, we're a specialist bookseller up here in Massachusetts. We deal in books and now ephemera more and more, on decorative arts, fine arts, architecture, design, death, fakes, frauds, and forgery, and things like that.
A wonderful, eclectic, and well-read, and just, a legacy bookseller. And one of my favorite human beings, but really, really eclectic, incredible. His wife Amy is just lovely, and I've had the happy, blessing to visit them in their home and meet the cats, past and present, and yeah. Hi, you.
Hey.
So, talk a little bit about your specializations, or unless Lindsay has a different question, because his specializations are really speak to that diversity in focus.
That's what I want to hear about. That's definitely what I want to hear about.
Okay. Well, we started out in books on antiques and reference books, and the references, as anyone who sells any sort of reference books knows, that market is headed downhill in terms of pricing and in terms of saleability of the stock. And so about a year or two ago, we broadened out into ephemera. And to a certain extent, we're dealing in the same sorts of things in ephemera, art and antique ephemera and things like that, but we've, of necessity, broadened out into things that interested us anyway: Americana, history, architecture, design, printing, all sorts of weird stuff. We just did a catalog of 19th century business cards based on a collection that we bought, and are now actually about to issue another one on Tuesday. Just wild, weird stuff. Fun.
I see a cat.
A cat. There's a cat. She's just walked across the keyboard and done something. Here we go. Okay. That's fine.
Didn't turn you off.
You're still here.
That's awesome.
So I'm curious. Tell us about death as a collectible.
Death is something that we've been doing for a long time. Again, we started in books about funerals, about mourning customs. We started out actually selling new books on antiques and art. We would always get asked when we did fairs about books on Victorian funeral customs and funeral memorabilia. And there were only a couple books at that time, but then as we got into old books, and now more into ephemera, things on mourning. The Victorians had a huge, one doesn't want to call it a cult, but a huge elaborate systems for mourning. And so they had mourning cards, which you will find, and announcements, and all sorts of things. And so anything like that, people want to sell us books on embalming, and autopsies, and things like that. And we don't do so much the technical side of death, but more the memorial and the, not the decorative, but the memorialization of it and the commemoration and funerals and things like that.
And I know I love those cultural markers, and I know that many people do, probably primarily because they are you know, bookmarked within all of the language and translation that the Victorians utilized for every aspect of life. And I think that they actually made death somewhat beautiful and palatable in a way that maybe hasn't been revisited. And it speaks to our own fascination with, you know, aspects of mortality. And like, did you catch, or either one of you, the at the Met last year, the Death Becomes Her exhibit was just astounding, and it was highlighting mainly the costumes, but they did it so very, very, very well. They had ephemeral, if you will, museum play cards. Of course, they had fixed cards underneath all of the gowns to say that this is Queen Victoria's morning dress, which is about 2 feet tall, as you can guess. But they also had these what's the word for that? Projected text that were flashing slowly on and off of the surrounding walls. It was like an island exhibit with the walls being used more for smaller moments to pass through. And it was so chilling to see the words and verses from real letters and people writing about these customs, the kind of customs that then Forrest, you know, trades in the source material for those. But it was really a beautiful, I'll have to send pictures to whoever wants them. It was a fabulous exhibit that, of course, is well documented, and you could probably buy the book on it and any other accoutrements because it was done by the Met, so it has long legs.
Yeah. It's interesting. Missed that exhibit, but we do there. I'll get my train of thought here in just a second.
Mine ran away.
Like you, I noticed, been selling a lot of 19th century letters, and we had a lot of 19th century letters. And one thing from letters from the 1830s, 1840s up to the 1880s and 90s that are personal family letters, people always start out talking about who's sick, who's well, who died.
Who died.
And then you always catch this hint of uncertainty when people get sick that they may not recover.
Yes.
And so for the Victorians, people dying all around them was much more common occurrence, much closer to, much more uncertain. It could happen, and someone could get fever on Tuesday and be dead by Friday, and that wasn't uncommon. And so they had a different take on mourning customs and funerals and that sort of thing. I remember one of the things, very rare item, we had 4 of them back before I truly realized how rare they were. The Victorians gave out biscuits at funerals, and we had 4 Victorian funeral biscuit wrappers.
Oh.
And these were like 8 by 10 sheets of paper, and they were very thin, tissue-like paper, and they each had printed on them a memorial poem, drawn at random, not necessarily about the person, but a memorial poem, and then printer's ornaments around them with things like weeping willows and gravestones, all the funeral iconography.
Wow.
And these would be, and at the bottom, the slug line was so-and-so funeral biscuit baker. And I've only ever seen, after we had those 4, I've only ever seen one other, because obviously this would be the most ephemeral of ephemeral.
Packaging. Do you know if I'm curious now if Library Company Philadelphia, I wonder, we'll have to ask Rachel D'Agostino if they have anything of that sort in their Americana packaging collection, which is massive, very comprehensive. So I'd be curious if there are any in holdings there.
I have a couple. These. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No. These were English. The funeral biscuit, I think, was more of an high-class English thing in America, but you never know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions about this sort of ephemera. Do you see much in the way of the posed photographs with family dead? I know there was a vogue in 1850 when photography became relatively common to actually have a photograph done of the with or with.
Yeah. You see some every once in a while. Whenever you see a picture of a baby, you always sort of look away. It's easy to pose. If it was a full-grown person, you would have more, although early on in studio photography, they had stands that they could with. But every once in a while, you'll find something. And it's on the other lines where people sell these sorts of things. People are always very hopeful that maybe the baby.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's like the Willy Wonka golden ticket. Everybody who has a DAG or a cabinet with a little bit of a still-looking child usually ends up lighting up some serves or some boards, or or people get called out saying this is a postmortem. This is a postmortem, and 99% of the time it isn't. I see more hidden mother photographs than mortems, but it's just kind of funny because it's like, I don't know what else to compare it to, like a Lincoln document. Everybody holds it up and goes, "This is it." No, that baby's just sleeping. They just caught it blinking. The exposure was really long, but everyone's hopeful for them. And we've seen a resurgence in modern culture now because of Brooklyn and hipsters bringing the 1890s back. Like Justin Timberlake's going to have a song, "I'm bringing in the 1890s back." Death Salon and some of the other modern morticians and modern outfits who are kind of educating and allowing people to be empowered by taking charge of their own thoughts about death and mortality, movements towards either green burials or innovative styles of, dealing with this end of life stuff. I think we are in, some of that ties into just this whole new obscurities fascination, but the Wunderkammer kind of, fascination that I think also is gaining popularity again, and just things that are odd. But I think it more ties into us needing to feel some permanent way to think about impermanence in this digital transient culture. What do you think?
Oh, me? I'm sorry. I'm still getting used to this.
That was more of a monologue than a question.
I'm throwing it to you. It's interesting. I just posted this morning. I posted an article from, I'm going to forget the magazine. It was talking about Japanese death poems versus Western death poems and last words. And of course, in the West, but they have last words, and the sort of beginning in the Renaissance, the cult of looming over the deathbed to catch the last words and hiding people behind curtains so that you could catch the last words. And these were thought to be much more definitive of the true self, that the person about to die would utter in their last words a great truth, or something that would show their true soul. Like, more light, please. It was one of Tycho Brahe or something. Versus the Japanese culture, where they write death poems which are thought out very much ahead of time, that people will 10 or 15 years before they're expecting themselves to die, will work on this, and they'll pacify other people, and they'll edit, and they'll be very careful about the whole thing. And then the contrast between the Eastern and Western approaches to it. Interesting article. It's online now. It just came up this morning.
Well, I think kind of I suppose they would think it's sort of déclassé the way the English particularly have viewed death. I think of Thomas Carlyle saying, "So this is death," right before he expired, or Lytton Strachey saying, "Well, if this is death, I don't think much of it."
Although there was, I'm going to have to go get it. There was one Japanese poem which was very, very funny. See, this is the problem here, is it's so tempting to just click there and go over here. You can probably still see me.
Yeah, you can minimize the screen and we can still see you.
While you're looking, Lindsay and Joss and Forrest, I'll just tell you that I'm doing the same thing with multiple windows, and then I don't know where my eyes are looking, because Megan is trying to jump in, and I sent her the updated link, so she might be able to jump in. There, Megan, Underground Books on the floor of the Florida Fair.
Well, we always say that one of the allures of this form of broadcasting is that if it gets boring, you can still check your email.
Your email here.
Exactly.
No one screen with the tour. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm over at it was in the Paris Review that this appeared just today. Japanese death poem The famous poet Basho
Oh, yeah.
wrote, "Till now I thought that death befell the untalented alone. If those with talent too must die, surely they must make a better manure." So,
Wonderful. That's wonderful. I was fascinated for a little while with the concept of last letters. I really wanted to, I still might, I wanted to do a small catalog on last letters or those last moments. And what inspired me to do it was a last letter in the Isabella Gardner Museum in Boston. It was I don't know how many years ago, and they actually have a really, really huge ephemera exhibit and section somewhere in those, in those halls. But they had a last letter of, I think, Longfellow, and he is writing to, I think, one of his agents back in Hungary, who has sent him cases of his beloved Hungarian wine, Tokaj or Tokaj, and he is saying, "I haven't been well enough to drink it, my dear friend, but I hope the day will come when I will be able to lift a glass again and enjoy this, elixir that I love so much." And I don't know if he got a drink or not, but apparently they had, in their description of that, they had said this is known last letter to have been posted, not necessarily as last words, but last written things. And since we can't document the first words necessarily, other than, audially, I'm kind of fascinated by that myself. The ends of things are really amazing to think, what in this last space of mortality does somebody choose to share with the rest of us? And, I like it.
Emily Dickinson had a great last letter. It was
Yeah.
It was to one of her nieces, and I think it said, "Little friend called away."
Gosh, yeah. Once people maybe know and have awareness, like Boris said, they're going to have a different kind of framing than writing it in advance of, and with reflection and with a certain kind of repose. If you're writing it in advance, it shows that you have an awareness, a very kind of grounded approach, knowing that you will someday need that poem. Some of us don't want to even think about it until we are there, but either way, it really speaks to the state of the psyche when we're moving through those spaces. I'm jumping around windows to see if Megan has.
If it's a reflection of the French affinity for things Chinese and Japanese, that there was a member of the French Academy in the 18th century whose name escapes me, and his last letter, it said, "I am going to or am about to die. Either is grammatically correct."
Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah.
A number of years ago, I had a diary from the 1870s, I think it was, a schoolgirl, and most of it was fairly prosaic. She talked about going to a 4th of July celebration, and there were other things like that. Small town girl. And toward the end of it, people obviously were going into a period of sickness. It was the winter, and friends were getting sick, and Aunt Tilly got sick, and people began dying. And several close friends had died. This was obviously a fairly bad flu, I think, that was going around. And then she gets sick, and she feels herself getting sick in the diary, and then there are no more entries.
Wow.
Sort of enter sort of like, she wasn't identifiable. Unfortunately, you can't find out what happened, but I had a funny feeling about the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I often thought about as I moved through my, kind of just getting a little bit of my cultural bearings working with the 19th century, we always say, I feel like, some of us always say, I don't want to speak in absolutes, well, they were so used to it. They had 12 children so that, they knew the odds were not in their favor, or, we have this understanding that because death was so prevalent that it was like, going to Easter brunch and then another funeral. That was one of the cards from the letters in that Death Becomes Her exhibit, was a girl writing to another girl, and she was complaining because she was going to have to blow her whole spring budget on more black dresses because she needed more than one type, and to be seen properly you needed to. So she had said, cousin so-and-so died, and this means that I have to blow my entire budget on not pink and not yellow, but more black. And so, you know, in a way, you know, it was just part of life and didn't always affect you so greatly and dramatically as somebody who now could be, you could be 40 and not have gone to a funeral. But when when we dive into that century, we see that it absolutely still affected people. People, you know, went off the end. Some often never recovered after a particular loss of either a child or, you know, a significant family member. Just because it was so rote doesn't mean that people were, you know, they weren't hardened to it. They weren't, you know, just steeled by the, you know, frequency of it, so that it was, you know, just the same old thing, you know, as something other unfortunate news that wasn't death. It was still devastating, possibly more so. But what changed their coping, I feel, were these rituals for us that you know, offer this primary source material documenting. Those rituals allowed someone to move through the space of mourning with both externally visible and internally palpable kind of milestones and field markers. So as we know, you know, you changed your dress as you evolved through the mourning period, so that in the very beginning you wore the plainest things, with no trim, no shimmer, it wasn't a ruffle, you know, it was a and then as you move through time, you were allowed to even add trim and then move into deep plums and grays, so that you had this lightening of this veil, maybe, you know, kind of mirroring the lightness that you would hopefully in an ideal situation move through emotionally. And I think that would help people to where you didn't have to always announce your emotional state. It was readable within the community for everyone to know what was up. And as you also know, that, you know, the dress was different based on the closeness of your relation who passed. And your length of time was also denoted by that. So these subtle Victorian languages, like we hear about the language of flowers, the language of mourning dress, I think helped the community, but also helped the griever have some kind of protection through this clothing. You had to don something physically around your body that echoed what you were donning around your heart for that period of time. So I think it's a very useful tradition, even though a lot of Victoriana is, you know, a lot of pomp and fluff and gilded this and lacy that, but there was interesting purpose built into some of these things.
I think people make a mistake and misunderstand when we say that they were more used to death, or it wasn't easier for them. It was just simply that they were used to it.
Yeah.
I think Victorians were somewhat more fatalistic. They had a much more, not morbid, but fatalistic attitude toward their everyday life.
Yeah.
They certainly dealt with death in a way, in a more realistic way than we did today, because it was out there, it was memorialized, it was in your dress, in the cards, in everything in society, whereas today it's sort of a taboo topic.
Yeah, exactly. It's stripped away from us. We're not supposed to dwell in it. We're supposed to move on or do it quietly. And when the community and, you know, can all be involved in this exchange of visual language expressing either, you know, the state of mourning or the pace of mourning or the timeline, I think that only helps. Yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing that characterized that we lose sight of in that vein is that it wasn't so much that they were more used to it, that it just happened more often. And
of course.
Each time was if not more so, because parent and children, plural, might die in the same day or the same week. Or you have the Bronte sisters going to their brother's funeral, and within 6 months, 2 of them were dead. And certainly in my family, in the 1890s, childhood, were all of life in Eastern North Carolina, where it was no less catastrophic having all those more advanced social conventions available to them. And I think it also reflects it appears in different ways in different times. One of the things I've been interested to stumble into is the literature of polio that flourished in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And I discovered that just when some books happened to come my way. But that was truly something terrifying because no one really knew where it came from. Except that when it struck, it tended to be vicious and widespread. And I have several books written by North Carolina people who had families struck by it or who were struck by it themselves. Part of the way I came across it was a woman who lived up the road from my hometown in Shelby, North Carolina, and spent 60 years in an iron lung. Got to the point where she could have gotten out of it, but she found it more comforting and congenial and ended up going to college in it, learning how to use a computer and writing her memoirs. But those are of time and place, like the Great War flu epidemic, or some of the fevers and pandemics that followed the Civil War and during the war. Give you lots of different flavors of not only the suddenness and randomness of it, but the way that people dealt with it in all kinds of strata of life.
Exactly.
Well, I think they put death to death, Mr. Propel.
Yes.
What else? What
And
else?
on happy things, let us resurrect a different topic.
Yes. In the third hour, a new topic. What else have you got that's interesting?
You're breaking up.
Oh, Forrest, how was you had a fair last weekend? Yes. Did you do Lex?
Did Lexington? Yes.
Okay.
Lexington, which is it's now SNEB, the Southern New England Antiquarian Booksellers. Used to be Marriott, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Connecticut joined us. And their Boston Book Fair is actually in Lexington, which is, for those people who don't know the Boston area, it's about 15 miles outside the city. And it's the Spring Book Fair. It was held the same weekend as all the big events for Patriots Day weekend up here. And it's a very good fair. It's not a huge fair. There were probably 40 dealers, 50 dealers. But it was for us, it was very strong in terms of retail buying, which surprised me a little bit. Because it's been a while since I've done a fair of that sort that was strong for retail buying.
Great. That's great.
It was very good.
Well, that's great to hear. Did you do any good buying?
I might have done a little bit of good buying.
That's great. That's great. Speaking of buying, what else is going on this weekend is the Oxford Fair. And I've been hearing some reports from friends there that, they're picking up some interesting things here and there. Not exactly a wholesale buying fair, but there's goodies out there. But has anybody on today other than Edie and Steve and Thorne, anybody filled you in on the floor and on the happenings there, like we were talking about when I first came on as we closed the hour? I wish we could talk to the floor right now, but Megan just wrote and said tomorrow she's distracted, and I suppose that she means is Josh has probably, her partner, her husband and her partner in the business has probably said, no, you can't go talk on the thing, you got to write tickets. So I think they're probably selling gangbusters on the floor of the Coliseum, and that's why it's quiet in here, except for people who aren't in Florida. Well, I'm in Florida, but you know what I mean.
I suspect that is correct. The information we were hearing from everyone before you were able to join us was that it was a bellwether year in St. Petersburg. And I wonder if, based on the report now out of New England, whether this may be a banner year nationally or a trend.
Decided they need to educate themselves.
Well, we'll say we have the next major fair we have up here in New England is the Concord Fair, coming up on May 3rd. So that will be the next as we. Sorry, Amy has just entered the office. That will be the next thing that we see up here. This is Kara on the web.
Yes, hi, Kara.
Hi, Amy. How are you? And LindsayThompson from North Carolina.
Oh,
Hello.
hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh,
Sure.
Okay.
What's going on?
We're on the web live with thousands of people talking about books.
Oh, my.
And there's the cat spot right here in front of the
Okay,
camera.
well, I'm going to let you continue talking.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Have fun.
Okay, we're back here for more books.
We love book-related romance and romance books.
exactly.
You were talking about the Concord Fair coming up.
Concord Fair, that's a long running fair. It's up at the right off the main road in Concord, New Hampshire. That fair has been going on since I started with books like 30 years ago. And it's recently been sort of reviving somewhat to the point where they have a full arena and a good crowd. It's a one-day fair, Sunday, May 3rd, I think it is. And we'll have to see.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Now, see, what else does May bring? I'm trying to think. Oh, Allentown is next weekend, yeah?
Yeah. Allentown is true.
Yeah, Allentown Paper Show is next weekend. That's always fun. And really, really good stuff. Well, I guess we'll have to wait till tomorrow to hear how Saturday's full day went in St. Petersburg. But I, personally cannot wait to hear some stories from the ground, Lindsay, right?
Absolutely. Now that Forrest has mastered internet television, I hope you will feel free to drop in on the Rare Book Cafe any Saturday. Just drop one of us a note at rarebookcafe@gmail, and we can send you that week's version of the code you used to join us today. And we'd love to hear of your adventures on the Silk Road of book trading this year.
All right, I may do that.
You should do it. I did it. It was fun. And Forrest, you'll join. You even some chat. Oh, hello.
Nothing awkward going on here. Live TV doesn't have any problems whatsoever. Yes, you were saying, Kara?
I was just saying that Forrest and I were doing some pre-tests because he's joining me on the Armchair Antiquarian, which is we're live streaming, and hopefully with some frequency we'll be doing another great weekly or bi-weekly show talking about everything related to the antiquarian and the larger book trade and social and cultural oddities, like some of the things that we both are fascinated by between paleography and letters and vernacular photography and things like that. So hopefully you'll see us all again. We'll all be together in the same little chat room again.
There are no more walls.
That,
We have the internet.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying there are no more walls now that we have the internet.
No, it's really, really awesome. It's a cool thing. So, well, have you heard from how is Allan doing today, Lindsay? Besides from out of battery, how is he doing in the?
He exemplified what you described to us in some of our plays, worn out by the time the book fair starts.
Right.
From the travel and the unpacking and the setting up and all the anticipation but then the adrenaline kicks in as soon as the crowds come in.
Exactly.
He looked 20 years younger this morning.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I think we will have a sprightly Allan to contend with tomorrow.
Well, that'll be great. So tomorrow at 2, yeah?
Yes, 2 to 4 tomorrow will be our last segment. It's almost 7.5 hours of programming in this first experiment broadcasting 36th Florida Antiquarian Book Show, and from far-flung points all up and down the East Coast. Well, that's 2 o'clock to 4 tomorrow Eastern Time. And again, we would love to hear from some of our viewers. We have set up on the Facebook Book Fair page a code every day that you need only to click, and it will bring you to this program to join us. You can bring your cat with you if you like. You can bring your books with you to talk about, or you can just sit in on the conversation. We can talk about whatever passes through our heads. That's part of what makes this process all so much fun. And I'm grateful to all of those who've taken part in today's show, yesterday's program, particularly my co-host, Kara Accettola, who has worked us into a very trying week and a busy schedule. And we will join you again tomorrow. You can find us on Facebook pages for the Florida and the Rare Book Cafe, Buckenstein's radio show, and all of these shows Florida channel on YouTube, where you'll find nearly 200 hours book-related features and conversations that have been filmed in this and book fairs past. So happy reading, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Bye, Forrest.